We're becoming fatter. We're becoming fatter because we eat too much. How's that for an uplifting opening to a talk? Right after lunch, when I'm sure you can still taste those chocolate chip cookies in your mouths. But really, we are becoming fatter. You see a ton of statistics around you. Let me show you a few. They're a little different from the ones we get to see from the Centers of Disease Control, but I think they're telling anyway. The dinner plates and the soup bowls from which we eat our food are 30 to 40% bigger today than they were 20 years ago. The cups of soda from which we sip our soft drinks are 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as big as they were 20 years ago. In fact, I don't know if we want to call them cups. They're really more like pitchers. We've gotten bigger as we eat from these big plates and we sip from these big cups. Our bodies get bigger, and of course, our clothes get bigger to fit us. But thanks to the magical delusion of vanity sizing, I still wear the exact same dress size today as I did 20 years ago. And I can tell you, folks, oh gosh, I'm not anywhere near the weight I was 20 years ago. The point is, we are fatter, and we don't know it because we feel very comfortable in the things around us. The lazy boy recliners in our dens, much bigger than they used to be. The diameters of the MRI machines in the hospitals when we go in for our body scans are 60% bigger today than they were in 1990 to fit our bodies. I guess the only thing that I can think of that hasn't actually grown but has shrunk in the last 20 years, take a guess. Economy seats in airplanes? How about that? The other thing I think is that our canine kids who get to doze in our extra large recliners and our king-size beds, they actually haven't gotten much fatter. And you know why? They don't get to choose what they eat. They don't get to choose how much they eat. We control that for them. A few days ago, I was giving my husband grief as he was rolling out food for our dogs. And I said, Anand, Tattie's 12 years old. She's getting too fat. You're feeding her too much. And he said, you know, Kusum, if we paid as much attention to how much we eat as we do to how much our dogs eat, we'd all be in much better shape. And you know, he's right. Think about it. If we measured out our food every day and then ate it, we'd be a slim and trim country in a slim and trim world. But no, that's not what I'm about to tell you. I'm not going to tell you to sit and measure your food every single time you eat. The point is that we do eat too much because we eat mindlessly. We don't pay attention to what we eat. We don't pay attention to how much of it we eat. We also eat too much because that delectable combination of sugar and fat and salt in all the processed foods around us are just so hard to resist. But none of that is news to you. That's actually not what I'm here to talk about. What I want to talk to you about is what happens when we do become mindful about what we eat. What happens when we get actually more health and diet conscious? What changes do we make? What happens when mindfulness is sort of thrust upon us because we get hit with a major disease that's related to our obesity, like type 2 diabetes? What changes do we make then? And what do those changes tell us about ourselves as consumers and to marketers who make as well as sell the foods that we eat? And I'm here both as a consumer and as a marketer. The challenge, of course, in finding out what happens when we are more mindful is I need a good way to find out what people are eating, not just when I put them in a lab and observe what they choose, but what they eat on an everyday basis at home. We could ask them, and actually that's what public health professionals have to do. When they have to counsel their patients on their diet, because diet is a really important part of managing their disease, the best they can do is ask their patients what they eat. And patients fill out these dietary recall forms, think back to the last 3 days, week, 6 months, and tell us how much of each of the following different kinds of foods you've eaten. Put yourselves in the shoes of those patients. We forget what we ate. We all forget what we eat. Of course, there are some things we didn't forget, but we want to forget them in the doctor's office. But the irony is that even when we don't forget, and even when we want to tell the truth, we don't really know the truth about how much we eat. Let me show you what I mean by that. There are some really good behavioral researchers all around the country and around the world that have been doing work on what cues consumers use to figure out what's the right amount of food to eat. I'm going to show you just some of that. This is not my work. This is work that other people have done. So Pierre Chandan and Brian Wansing, two very well-known food researchers, and their colleagues have found that we take cues about what the right serving size is based on the shape and the size of the containers that are in front of us. Tell people to help themselves to ice cream in a 24-ounce bowl instead of a 16-ounce bowl, and they'll serve themselves at least 20% more ice cream, and of course, we eat it all up. Aradhana Krishna and her colleagues find that if you take a bag of pretzels or a bag of nuts, a medium-sized bag, and do nothing else to it but change the medium label and replace it by a small label, suddenly, magically, we think there's 18% fewer calories in the bag. And then we eat up the whole bag. Now, here's the topper. Ask people how many calories there are in a cheeseburger. Well, you're going to say, well, it depends where we got the cheeseburger from. Yes, I know. But, people will estimate the calories. By the way, they do a really bad job and severely underestimate the calories in the cheeseburger. But that's not what this is about. Now, ask another group of people how many calories there are in a cheeseburger and a side salad to go with it. And magically, 13% fewer calories. Somehow, when we add a good thing to a bad thing, the calories don't add up, they average out. That's research by Alex Chernev and some of his colleagues. The point of this is that we are terrible at figuring out what the right serving size is of what we eat. And we're even worse at figuring out what we've actually eaten. So it doesn't really help to ask people how much they eat. They don't know. So my colleagues and I, who wanted to answer this question about how we eat when we are more mindful, decided we needed a better way to get at this. And we decided that there is something that doesn't lie and there's something that doesn't forget, and that's your shopping carts. When you go grocery shopping, the products that you've put on those carts, the barcodes on those products, and the nutrition labels that go with those products, those don't lie, those tell the truth. And the scanners in the checkout counter that store the data on what you bought, those don't forget. So we take these data from thousands of families across the United States and look into it to figure out what people are eating and what drives that eating behavior. What are the factors that influence them? We do this literally for thousands of families, and we look at the 20 largest packaged processed food categories that are sold in the US, all the way from yogurt and milk and cheese and juice to salty snacks and cookies and ice cream and frozen meals. Let me tell you what we find about what drives our eating. So I'm going to show you a chart holding a lot of other stuff constant. If I look at the impact of education on how many calories we take in from these large processed foods, no surprise, the more educated we are, the better we do. The more involved we are in nutrition, the more carefully we say we look at nutrition labels, the more we're concerned about trans fats and refined foods, the better we do. The more health conscious we are, the more we say we don't eat late at night, we know it's not good for us, the more regularly we eat our vitamin supplements, the more we say we resist indulgent desserts, the worse we do. Significantly worse. What is going on? So what we did was we said, gosh, what is up here? We separated all these large food groups, which, by the way, account for half of all packaged food sales in this country. So I'm not looking here at a tiny group of foods. This is really a large number of foods. If I separate them out into foods that we just all know are not bad, not good for us. I mean, we still eat them, we love them, they taste good, but we know they're not good for us. And then there are foods that have a positive health halo around them. We think of them as not being bad for us. Yogurt and juice and cheese and soup. And now if I look at what health-conscious people do, they're not out of their minds. They do eat less of the obviously bad-for-you stuff. But they more than make that up. That red arrow is bigger for a reason. They more than make that up with eating way too much of the stuff that they think is not bad for them. We all have what is called a health halo bias. There's a health halo on some foods. We think it's okay to eat those foods. But the most diet and health conscious amongst us are the ones that are the most vulnerable to this health halo bias. I bet you can think of some of your friends, the one that is so careful about what he or she eats, tells you what is good for you. Chances are they're putting away many more calories than you are. And I know some of my friends sitting in this audience are thinking, yeah, Kusum, that would be you. At any rate, so we have the strong health halo bias. Here's the picture again. And you're wondering why the bars got squished a little. The bars got squished a little because I had to make room for another bar. And that bar is a bar that tells you not the impact of what we do, but the impact of what marketers do. When marketers choose to price certain products low and certain other products high, when marketers choose to promote certain products in the store and put the big for sale signs on them, that has 5 times as much impact on what we eat as any of the stuff that we do for ourselves. So what marketers do really, really is important. And what marketers do is even more important, perhaps, as we are being forced to become more mindful of what we eat because we're getting hit by disease. So going back to the data I told you we were analyzing, we had about 1/3 of the families in our data, and that's like 700-odd families, where someone in the family was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes during the 4 years during which we were analyzing these data. And then we had 2/3, the remainder of the people in our sample, who were similar to these families in all other respects, except there wasn't a diagnosis. So we can really figure out what changes people are making when they get hit with a diagnosis. Here's what they do. The good news first. By the way, I'm going to show you here the results from families where the patient is male. Guys, I'm sorry, these are the data speaking, not me. But when families where the patient is female are looked at, they do much better. Not great, but they do much better. The story of why men are from Mars and women are from Venus, we'll leave that for another day. But today, I'm just going to show you first the good news. We do eat less sugar when we are hit with diabetes. We do eat fewer carbohydrates when we are hit with diabetes. But we more than make that up by not just not cutting our fat, but actually significantly increasing it. And the result of it is that the net carbohydrate intake from these big packaged foods, the net calorie intake, is really not changing very much. The interesting thing is that these families cut their sugar and the carbohydrate from sugared soft drinks. We moved from the sugared ones to the diet and regular ones. They're to the diet and the low-calorie ones. They're easily available. They're about the same price. In fact, they're exactly the same price as the regular sodas. But we increase our fat intake from processed meats, from salty snacks. Why is this happening? Well, one reason might be that when you're watching your glycemic index and you're looking for foods and you don't have the time to cook from fresh ingredients at home, you're looking for foods that are low in sugar and carbohydrate, and the only ones that are out there also happen to be very high in fat. The other thing is, although products like processed meats do have healthier alternatives, there are alternatives that are a lot lower fat than others. But those low-fat alternatives are priced 60, 70, 80% higher than the more unhealthy ones. So the pricing that marketers are doing really is mattering. So just as we need to be very careful about changing our mindset, marketers need to change their mindset too. There's a reason. There's a good reason why they charge more money for healthier alternatives, above and beyond the fact that it might cost them a little more to make it. It used to be that the healthy foodie was a rich and niche segment. Small group of people, price insensitive, able and willing to pay high prices for healthy food. That's not the case anymore. We're all being hit by our health risks. We are all being forced to become more mindful. So if marketers have to sell to us, they need to figure out what to do to keep us as customers and not lose us to disease. Don't charge a premium, a huge price premium for your healthiest alternatives. Don't make it harder for us to move to those healthier alternatives. Charge a sugar premium. Charge a fat premium. We buy those things and eat them anyway. We'll pay the slightly higher prices for them. If you want us to follow health information, make it salient for us. When you walk into the store, it is impossible to miss the big, bright yellow, bright red for sale signs. It's really hard also to miss the 5 grams of whole grain, 10 grams of protein on the front of the package of food. But when we try to provide information that is actually helpful to us, we do that on the back of the package. Put the total calories, put the number of servings on the front of the package just as boldly. Some marketers are actually now providing us with some guidance in the store when we go shopping. Guiding stars, nutrition values, or what are called Nuval scores. The problem is, I've shown you there a close-up, actually. This is from a distance, and that's a close-up. I need a microscope to find those guiding stars. And then when I find the guiding stars, they're on the fruit and vegetables. We don't need the guiding stars to tell us that fruit and vegetables are good for us. We need the guiding stars when we go into the processed meat aisle and into the salty snack aisle and the ice cream aisle. No sign of these guiding stars in those aisles, not even with a microscope. No wonder when we tried to do some research to see if putting these guiding stars actually made people choose healthier products in stores, we got zilch, no change. We can't even see the darn things. But it's not all bad news. There is good news. When we do some of these things, they do actually work. So there is research by Jason Rees and his colleagues where they ran a long experiment at the hospital cafeteria at MGH in Boston. They put bright red, yellow, green signs to guide us to the good foods and the not so good for us foods. And they found that indeed there was a 10 to 20% reduction in the purchases of the red items and a 10% increase in the purchase of the green items. You lower the price of low-fat milk compared to whole milk by just a few pennies, really increases the share of low-fat milk, especially in low-income areas, and those are the people that are the most vulnerable to this type of disease. So when companies like Wal-Mart say that they are going to try and commit to reducing the price premium for the healthiest products in their stores, that's a wonderful initiative. That's something very, very good. When cereal companies committed 4 years ago to saying that they would reduce the number of grams of sugar in their kids' cereals from 13, 14, 15 grams to under 10 grams, huge benefit. It is these small chipping away at the unhealthiness of our foods, and it is our own small chipping away at our biased heuristics that is going to help us, and we are already starting to see it. We are starting to see that after 20 years of steep inclines in all kinds of unhealthy statistics, childhood obesity, female and male obesity, diabetes incidence, finally in the last few years, we are actually seeing a leveling off. And if we can just continue to do some of these things as consumers and as marketers, I think we will start to finally see a downturn in these slopes. Thank you very much.